Hi listeners, welcome to the Women in Sports Therapy podcast from the Sports Therapy Association. I'm your host Fiona Higgs, and in this month's episode I'm very honoured to be joined by three experienced pitchside practitioners who each have very different career stories. Ceri Smale, Whelan and Kayleigh Jones. Today we're going to talk about what it's like working in and outside of pitchside therapy. So rather than introducing them myself, I'm going to let them do the honours. So Ceri, let's start with you. Can you give us a little bit of your backstory and how you got to be in the role that you're in now?
Hiya, so I'm Ceri. I'm a nurse and I qualified in 1997 in Cardiff, which it's a long time ago now, but it doesn't feel like it. And I worked for 20 years in the hospital. So I worked in A&E, critical care, emergency surgery, orthopedics, breast surgery. I worked in lots of different places. And then 7 years ago, left the NHS to take on a teaching role. So I went back and did my PGCE and mainly started doing a teaching role with Lubas Medical. But we teach pitchside medicine or pitchside emergency care. So we also work in that role as well. So I work pitchside at Cardiff City and for cricket, so for Glamorgan, and have done rugby and all different sports in the past, but mainly at the moment, Cardiff City and cricket is where I do my pitchside care.
Oh, amazing. Lots of experience in different settings and sports, and it brings quite a new a unique perspective, I suppose. So it'll be great to hear some more about those experiences. Thanks, Ceri. Kat, how about you?
Hi, so I'm Kat. So I guess previously I graduated from sports therapy in 2014. After I graduated, I actually got a teaching assistant role for a year. So I did my teaching qualification. And then I decided I've got a keen interest in S&C. So I then went and did a master's in S&C and then went into teaching for a little bit as well for a few years. But then I wanted to go back into industry. So I went back as a sports therapist at Warwick Sport for a while whilst doing an S&C internship. During COVID, that was a bit of an odd time for everybody, I think. But I worked with a Super League netball team, 7 Stars, for a while, and then volunteered at Coventry United Ladies, just getting some more experience with like the S&C side of things. But I also supported sort of the medical side, just kind of getting stuck in occasionally, just helping out actually Kayleigh and the head of medical there. Coventry United Ladies then went full-time the season after, so I applied for the full-time role there and was successful. So last season I was the first team sports therapist there for the year, and Coventry United had a few issues during that time, but they went into liquidation, so I ended up actually getting a job at Coventry University as an S&C coach, which I am still there at the moment. And then I also got the lead S&C role at Boldmere St Michael's in Sutton Coldfield. But during my time there, I've also sort of transitioned to sort of head of medical there as well. So so that's kind of my current background.
Wow. You guys, like the list of experiences. I think a lot of people think that going into therapy kind of roles or medical kind of roles is very linear and straightforward, but oh my goodness, that is not the case. You can go anywhere with it, and the experiences all culminate into forming the person that you are, don't they?
Absolutely.
Great, thanks, Kat. Kayleigh.
Hiya, so I'm Kayleigh. I graduated sports therapy back in 2019. I also went into teaching assistant role for 2 years, and then I progressed onto an associate lecturer role, which I'm doing now. Part-time, I also do pitchside work. So I work in sports therapy at Bristol Rovers Academy, and so I'm currently working with paediatrics, but previously I did work with Kat, Coventry United Ladies, doing some sports therapy work there. Also worked at Cheltenham Football Club as well, also paediatrics. So I'm kind of staying in that paediatric kind of area at the moment.
Amazing, Kayleigh. Very good, thank you. I should point out actually that I have a lot to thank UCB for the listeners may know that I'm lecturing at a university on a program, but actually thinking about it, I met Ceri, Kat and Kayleigh all through my current employer. So it's been a common place sort of for all of us to be working from for different roles and reasons. I just wanted to point that out. But in terms of the kind of discussion points that we're going to talk about today, I wondered if anyone wants to chime in and sort of discuss how you found your particular role right now in terms of what opportunities may be opened up, because I've had questions from students on the courses that I teach on, or the course that I teach on, about how to get into team kind of roles, team positions. So whether that's elite sport or any other level of play, how did you actually land the role? Like, what were the connections that you had? And Kayleigh, maybe you can kind of go first.
Yeah, I think personally it's all about my placement experience. So what I did as an undergrad student. So worked at lower league rugby club. I also worked at Leicester City women's football, which landed quite well with the role that I got upon graduation in Cov United Ladies. But actually, when I graduated, I had people reaching out to me, asking me if I wanted to work with them. So it really is that networking. And when you're a student, going out on all those placements, making those networks, and be in that position where actually you're getting kind of asked if you're available for this and that. So that's how I landed my first pitchside role, was being asked by one of my lecturers actually whether I'd like to go on board with Cov Ladies.
Wow. Yeah, it is so much about who you know in this particular area of work, definitely. Cool. Thanks, Kayleigh. Kat?
I guess if I kind of reflect on my current role, so I went in as the lead S&C coach. I kind of say I've got a bit of a hybrid background, because I guess I've got two heads, an S&C one and a sports therapy one. I guess it was just kind of timing for me in terms of being head of medical there. So quite early in the season, our manager and our physio left. And you know, that after working at Coventry United Ladies and seeing how that operated, not only part-time but also full-time, and I guess taking lots of positive things away from that about, you know, okay, what can I implement from that kind of high-level performance? Obviously it can't be exactly the same because it's a part-time program from a full-time, so how can we better kind of support the athletes that I'm working with at tier 3, and because that physio left, because I had a dual background, I stepped in to cover both of those roles in that time. So it was probably about a 6 or 7 week period for kind of time period before we actually recruited somebody else. So in that time, I guess I took the opportunity really to try and implement some things. So exercise rehab wasn't actually something that was well established in the club. I don't think it was, well, if they were injured, they just sort of didn't come to training, whereas I wanted to change that. So I, you know, spoke to relevant people at the club, and kind of they agreed that was a positive thing for us to try and implement and change. And the guy we've taken on is a sports therapist, but he was newly graduated, so he did a master's in sports therapy. So I guess I saw my role as, well, you know, can I help this person, because we were all limited to what we know once we graduate, and it's only after that and gaining experience where we can then do better and learn more and kind of be better practitioners. So because I'd had a little bit more experience than him, I guess I saw my role and an opportunity to put things in place that weren't in place at the club to try and support staff as well as the players more so, but then also support the sports therapist joining us, and he's been really great. And you know, we've been able to make some really positive changes at the club. So yeah,
that's so cool. It's really great and so satisfying when you see an opportunity to improve something and then it actually comes to fruition, you know, and people are on board with it. And that, you know, I think what our listeners, you know, if you're a new graduate or you're kind of going through the motions of studying for whatever discipline it is that you have. We have people obviously who are members of the STA who are sports therapists, but there could be anybody listening. Just to try and get as much experience as you can, and those opportunities they do arrive through connections and just knowing like that you're useful, I suppose.
I think as well, like, you know, the sports therapist is a really lovely guy, but he was also really open about what his strengths and areas of development were. And I think, you know, just because you've graduated, I think it's not to assume that you know everything or need to know everything. You know, you'll have a set level of knowledge upon graduation, and then it's about building that and, you know, using the people around you and bouncing ideas off. You know, me and him regularly discuss players and how to manage them, you know, or he'll ask me my thoughts on things, and, you know, and we have those meaningful conversations. So to make a group decision around a player, and, you know, if he needs some support, extra support with things, then, you know, I'll offer that because I might have a bit more experience in that. So I think, again, it's being open to learning off other people when you graduate as well. So I think that's always key. You know, you're not expected to know everything, and it's okay to not know everything, but I guess it's that kind of drive to actually, well, I don't know everything, but I will do my best to try and learn and do better and learn from the people around me. Absolutely,
yeah. There's the term of when I was doing my PhD, I learned about imposter syndrome, and I think that I have always had that. I think everybody actually has that to a certain level. We really don't like, I mean, as humans, we know nothing. We're just, you know, existing. But recognizing your limitations and areas of growth is just so important. And people actually respond really well if you're open and honest, don't they? They can see if you're a Billy bullshitter, you know, it's pretty obvious. It's good to be open and open to learning. Awesome, thank you, Kat. Ceri.
So how did I get into my role? Where we go.
Yeah, like what was the opportunity?
So it is like networking and who you know. It's not what you know. Well, obviously it is what you know a bit, but who you know is obviously important. So my boss, this is long time ago now. In 1999, the Rugby World Cup came to the UK and came to Cardiff, and the physios who were going to be pitchside at that tournament were asked by the organisers, you know, what's your plan for a spinal injury? What's your plan for this? What's your plan for that? And they didn't have a plan because they'd never learned those things. So my boss kind of invented a course to teach physios how to do pitchside medicine. And it was at that time as well that pitchside medicine kind of took off. So I know you're all younger than me, but you know, in my day, there was a man with a bucket and a magic sponge, and he'd run on the pitch and, you know, put a sponge on someone's leg, and there was no stretcher. There's an amazing picture of Emlyn Hughes, who's a footballer of gone by, getting a piggyback off the pitch from the physio, because that's the only way they could get him off the pitch, because they, you know, nothing like that was around. So in 1999, as I say, my boss, you know, was asked to cover the Rugby World Cup, and then from that, sports medicine kind of grew. So there's pitchside teams at every you know event now, and I was just lucky that my husband actually worked for my boss first, because he knew him through work, because he's a paramedic and my husband's a nurse as well, and he knew him, and he just said, oh, do you want to come and help me cover, I think it was like the Wales under-17s game in Wrexham or something. So my husband started covering football games, and I started covering football games, because as it grew, you know, that, and then as you know, turns out years later, obviously, his company, or our company now, has grown so big that he needed another full-time person to come in and mainly do the training, but stick with the pitch side things as well. So I've kind of been there from the beginning.
That's so cool.
Yeah, when it wasn't. So it was. Yeah.
Do you feel that? I was going to say, do you feel like the scaling of it how has that journey been? Like, because starting something from a seedling and then, you know, being part of it as it's growing, do you feel like how has that felt? Like, do you feel like you're part of quite a big project, or does it feel like you're just still working with the same kind of small team of people?
Yeah, no, I think the reach that we have, or I'm not, taking, our company's not taking credit for it all, but that if you think, of Christian Eriksen and how he was resuscitated on the field of play, and how awareness of that now is so big. So if something happens in a football stadium or cricket stadium or anywhere, the members of the crowd will know that something's wrong, and the players on that field of play will know that something's wrong, and they'll stop the game and get help for that person. So I think just in terms of raising awareness is all I ever want to do, and I think I've potentially taught yourself and taught whoever, and all I want to do is give people confidence to go onto that field of play and, give the best care for that person, save that person's life, whatever is there. And so I think, from where, I wasn't there in 19, well, I was kind of there in 19, but from the beginning, just to know that there's people now on the side of the pitch who have got more than a sponge, who've got more knowledge. And I think last weekend or the weekend before, we had a message just on Facebook Messenger from a physio that we've trained saying, I had a cardiac arrest in the game today. Thank you so much, because I had an economic course. I don't think I would have known what to do. He survived. But, and it's just amazing that, but it's a bit strange, I guess, because coming from the world I came from, that's like my job day to day.
The bread and butter of the job,
so it wasn't, and it's amazing to come from an area where that's every day, that phone rings and you don't know what's coming into A&E, you're in, but that's every day what we do. Then to be able to pass that to people who it's not every day for. And I always say to people, I just want to take away the mystery. I want to take away the witchcraft. I want to let you know that what we do isn't, it's not magic. Unattainable. It's not magic. It's simple things that can help people. So I've had the opportunity to do that has been amazing. But it was who I knew. So as I say, my husband worked for my boss first, and then I did. So that's how I came into the role.
What have been the biggest challenges, or the single biggest challenge you've faced working in a pitchside capacity? So when you've worked pitchside, what have you kind of had to deal with that you thought, wow, maybe you look back on it and you're like, whew, that was close, or it could have been any situation really. Kayleigh.
Yeah, I actually had quite a serious injury like 3 weeks ago now with an away player. It's probably an injury that's tested me to the max so far in my career. So what happened was we have fencing around our 4G pitch. So your pitch side, and he got tackled, pitch side fell back and his head fell onto the floor and the fence. So when I got over, clear signs of hypoxia. So kind of that fitting, unresponsiveness, really scary. Obviously, thanks to Ceri, actually thank you, because I actually did your training. It was kind of dealing with that situation, getting all the coaches around, getting the support we need, so calling the ambulance, trying to reassure the player on the pitch that he's in safe hands, going into meals, keeping his neck, spine safe, but just trying to get him to respond in some kind of way with us, and wait for the ambulance to arrive. Had the defib and oxygen there. It's not something I've ever had to get before, prepare, but luckily we didn't need to use it, and he gained some kind of responsiveness by the time the crew came. But it definitely was that scary moment of, oh, go get the defib, I might have to use that, and you never want to do that. But on reflection, I'm very proud of how I handled it, but it's also made me remember not to be complacent. Not that I ever am, but when you're in pediatrics and it's just a bump and a scrape, and you don't get complacent, but the types of things you see are not necessarily those life-threatening serious injuries. So it's just kind of remembering that anything can happen at any time, at any age, and being prepared for it. But it was also a good learning curve for the students as well. So they weren't there on that particular day, but kind of coming in next week, telling them about it, what to look for, the telltale signs, etc., was really good learning for them too. Also had a really interesting injury, which happens in 1% of pediatrics, so lucky me, which was a patella sleeve. So so they hyperextended their leg, and because he was 13, the patella hadn't fully formed yet, and it's basically split in half. So the kind of patella bone was sitting really high up on the femur, which didn't look good, and he was scared to see that, obviously, and all his teammates were like, oh my god. And then the kind of cartilage was still there where it should be in the knee. So that was straight to A&E and surgery within 24 hours. And
Wow.
yeah, that was a really interesting one. And funnily enough, on the same day, the same hospital, another football player came in with the exact same injury.
Wow.
What are the chances? So I think this is something that's quite exciting in terms of a potential case study, because if it's happened twice in one day, you never know. And there's not much on it at the moment, so that's interesting. But yeah,
Right.
2 big challenges in the last month. Yeah.
Well done, though.
Thank you.
No, but that's frightening when someone's unconscious and having a seizure, and well done. Yeah,
Thank you.
And I'm assuming they're okay. They were.
Yep, all good, all good. Severe concussion, obviously, following the 2 weeks of rest now, which well, they're in the way. They were one of the away players, but from what I've heard, they're doing well.
Well done.
Oh, well done. Yeah, good job, Kayleigh.
Thank you.
Smashing it. Yeah, I think that's just like you said, highlighting the importance of first aid training, pitchside training, you know, making sure everything is up to date in the work that Ceri and her team do.
Preparing for the worst.
Definitely. Yeah. It's weird because I don't do pitchside at all myself, but I am definitely of the opinion that everybody should have first aid training because you just don't know. I mean, like, things happen every day, and being well prepared, you know, can't harm, can it?
No.
Okay. Ceri, what about you?
I guess I'm quite blessed. Challenging as in, because we're there kind of secondary, so obviously the physios would go on, or the therapist would go on, assess the player, and then call us if it's something, you know, really serious that we need to deal with. So I find that people tend to respect that and not give us any, you know, challenges. So I know for you, maybe for Kayleigh, for yourself, maybe you know, head injuries, concussion, and coaches will question you maybe, or you know, try and put pressure on you. But I think because we're there in a capacity, and everyone knows, well, this is serious if they're on the field of play, you know, with their high vis on and they look, you know, like that, then I think we tend to not get many challenges from players or staff or anything, because I think they kind of respect what we do and are grateful that we're there if we're on. Then yeah, so I don't tend to have people like, I don't know. Yeah, people are always generally quite nice. People always ask, because obviously, as I say, we work at Cardiff, and obviously when Cardiff in the Premiership, you tend to meet, you know, what was Jurgen Klopp like, and what was Pep Guardiola like, and you know, people like that actually meet amazing people. And I always say, no matter who people ask me about, what were they like to you? And I said, well, people are always nice to us because you need us, and there's no point being horrible to us or being stroppy to us, because we're the people who are going to come on and help you. So people are generally very nice to us and don't question us or challenge us, because I think they appreciate why we're there. So I don't tend to get many.
That's really good.
Not showing my disappointment maybe when the opposition score. I don't know.
Oh yes.
Because I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Not that I would, you know, with injuries, but no. But yeah.
What about maybe if we change the question a little bit then? So like medically, have you had any complicated cases where you've sort of been really pushed to, I don't know, your skills and limits have been really tested?
Touch wood. Touch wood. No, not really. Not where we didn't know. I wasn't on the pitch for one injury at Cardiff City, which was quite complicated, which was a player who was unconscious and potentially had a spinal injury and had a nosebleed. So his airway was constantly becoming blocked with the blood. So they constantly had to stop what they were doing, roll him, suction him, put him on the border. So that was quite a complex case for them to deal with. But as I say, I wasn't there for that one. So no, touch wood. I've been quite lucky in that what I expected to happen did happen, or you know, what should have worked did work, or you know, so I've been quite lucky, I think.
Ooh, very good, Ceri.
I've cursed myself now, haven't I? That's it.
That's what I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking, oh no.
Yeah, no.
We'll see where you're at next week. Okay, cool. Kat, how about you?
So I guess one particular incident that stands out to me was when I was working with Wales Lacrosse, so I was actually originally hired as the lead S&C for the senior performance team, but again, because I've got this sort of dual background, so there is a physio for the kind of senior development and senior performance team, but there hasn't been this sort of like they'd only just introduced S&C coaches and sort of maybe medical support for the junior teams. So normally they're referred to like their schools or like local physios typically. But we actually went on a tour to Italy to do a competition, and it was in July, and it was very hot in Italy. Now Italy's hot anyway, but it was, you know, when hot countries were experiencing even hotter temperatures. So anyway, it was very hot. Me and the kind of head of the women's program had tried to make sure that there was shade available, ice, things like that. But I think, you know, when you're working in maybe sports that are not as well established, certain things are not well established, or organisational aspects. So that was a challenge, and that there wasn't any shade provided when we arrived. So yeah, that was probably a difficult one. And being in a foreign country as well, English, you know, I speak a little bit of Italian, fortunately, but not enough to a medical standard at all. So and their English was, you know, not great either. So again, just navigating that a little bit, you know, was quite a challenge in a foreign country. So yeah, different standards of medical care and things like that.
Yeah, it is. So when this is honestly, my boss used to work for Welsh football, like the, you know, international Welsh team, not, you know, for all of them, but this is the, you know, you'd expect the best to be available, FIFA, UEFA, and all of that. I mean, years ago now, mind. And they went to, I think it was Azerbaijan for an away game, and it may not have been, but it was, I don't know. But and they said, "Oh, is there an ambulance on site?" And they said, "Yeah, there's an ambulance, you know, on site." And they said, "All right, okay then." And only because my boss is quite thorough and obviously good at his job, he was like, "Well, I'll just go and check out who's on the ambulance then and what's there, so I know what we can use." And he opened the ambulance doors, and it was just an empty van. And he said, is this the ambulance? And they said, "Yes, you wanted an ambulance." And they were like, "Well, yeah, but with people and stuff in it." And they were like, "Oh no, you didn't say that. You just said an ambulance. So we've got you an ambulance." I know. Obviously, this is a long time ago. Things are better now. But yeah, so that's, yeah. So now, you know, if you're abroad and whatever, to have a list of things, not just say, you know, is there medical cover with me? So, you know, that nurse who was there, thankfully, in Italy, but maybe ask, you know, who is there? What is their qualification? What kit do they have? What do they, before you go, so you know the gap. But yeah, that was, yeah.
The thing is, I found that because I asked all these questions to the head of women's lacrosse at the time, and I was like, can we find out what kit they've got? Have they got a defib? Because we didn't carry one. But again, you know, sports don't have as much money. If then, you know, that in, like, you know, Wales Lacrosse, you know, it's a smaller sport, and things like funding is less. And trying to get this information, and I remember it was on another tour actually. I went as the medical support for the senior performance team, and we were in the Czech Republic, and we got to this on site, and I was like, "Oh, is there a defib here?" Like, yeah, there's defib here. And I must have moved around 4 different people to find out whether we had this defib. So everyone seemed to think we had this defib, and we couldn't find it anywhere. And it then transpired that there was no defib on site. So okay, so if there's no defib on site, that's fine, but we then need to know, who do we call to. So like it's sometimes really difficult to communicate with organisations. That's probably something I've learned. So, you know, who I worked with at Wales Lacrosse was very thorough, but it was always a struggle to, again, maybe that miscommunication, like you're saying, you know, you've asked for an ambulance, you know, people have said, yeah, we've got this defib. There was no defib on site. Like, so, you know, again, those language barriers perhaps, or just miscommunication on, you know, when you say one thing, what somebody else interprets as that, and, you know, you turn up there and actually what you thought was there actually isn't there, and just navigating that on the spot is, you know, can be a challenge. So
yeah, but it is also like the lower levels, and we always say it's, I don't know, the higher the level you go up in sport, the more support you get and the more equipment you've got. So on a match day at Cardiff City, there's, if you think, you know, physios who've all done the FA course, there's 6 of us there to help. Everyone's got the training. I think there's like 4 defibs pitchside, because we've got one, Cardiff City have got one, the away team have got one, there's one in the stadium. You know, there's all of this equipment for that level, but the lower down you go, the less people have got and the less experienced people are. So, you know, if you think, yeah, it's the wrong way round, really. You should have the, you know, more equipment and things where there's less help, less cover, but it doesn't go that way, does it? It seems to go the other way, which doesn't make sense. But
maybe with more time and kind of like we'll see some changes happening. I think there are some of those high profile.
If where we are from 1999, when there was the man with the sponge and the bucket, I think where we've come now, then hopefully, you know, by the time you're all my age, it'll all be great.
When you said magic sponge earlier, it made me think of those like little white sponge. I don't know if you've seen them, like JML type white sponges. Really good at cleaning. I've got a few of those knocking around under the sink somewhere, probably.
My son used to be obsessed with all the JML adverts. He'd love it. He'd think they were like these amazing inventions.
They're just regular things.
Yeah, they're just normal things.
Yes. So what shall I ask you next? I've got my little list here. I'm just looking around my microphone, it's in the way. What advice would you give to a therapist or medical practitioner starting out in a pitchside role? So we've talked a bit about challenges you faced and the types of work that you do and how you got into it, but if there's any advice that you could give maybe to yourself when you were first starting out doing pitchside work, what could that have been? What would have really helped you, or what could help people in this current era? Is there anything that you could advise, Kayleigh?
Yeah, a few things. Firstly, it would be get to know your EAP inside and out, so your emergency action plan. Make sure you're really confident in that, and you're able, if you are the only medical provision there, make sure you're confident in managing that if need be. So knowing where your DFib is, where your medical equipment is, knowing what medical equipment you've got and that they are in check. So is your DFib working? Is your oxygen full? Have you got a good level of oxygen there if needed? So being confident with your EAP and the equipment that you've got. Also, just expose yourself to as many experiences as possible, as many age groups and sports as possible while you're young and able and carefree, you know. Just expose yourself, just say yes to all the opportunities. And because, you know, I'm working in pediatrics now, you see like a complete different range of injuries than you do with like a first men's team, for example, you know, all your Oscar slatters, etc., all the classics that you see in pediatrics. I had to learn about all of those since joining. So different age groups, different sports, and just knowing your EAP and what equipment you've got available. And if you don't have certain equipment, how are you going to manage without that? Because in grassroots football, especially, or grassroots sport in general, you may want equipment, but funding, you just can't, and you can argue for it, but it can be a while before you get that. So it's, what are you going to do in the meantime? How are you going to manage that to ensure the safety of your players and everyone that's kind of getting onto your venue on that day?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, there's a lot of planning involved. And I mean, from just, you know, listening to you guys all talk, you know, having backup plans and making sure you know what's available is really important, a part of the job. So if you're still studying, make sure you're paying attention to those particular components of your study, because you learn that once and then you kind of go off into the working world. It's down to you, really, isn't it? Awesome. Okay, Ceri.
Advice. Going into my role, I don't know, it's hard, but I would have to say, try and be learn what you need to know, and know that if you haven't got equipment, there are things you still can do to keep people safe. That's important. To remember there's always something that you can do, but be confident in I don't know, taking control and telling people, no, I know what I'm doing and I'm going to look after this person, and don't be swayed, which is much harder, I think, when you're younger. I've obviously had 25 years of telling people, no, this is what we're doing. And then I've got a look that I do, and then no one argues with my look, and they go, oh, no, she means that, so we'll do what she says. But that's really hard when you're young to develop that. So I would just, if you like, foreshadowing or making yourself available for any opportunity, you know, so if you can just watch how other people do it and watch how other people are, who maybe have been in the game a bit longer and maybe, have got that air of, and sometimes we've got that air, but we're swimming like swans underneath. But I think it's important to, portray.
Yeah, you really you make a really good point. And I mean, I mentioned earlier sort of imposter syndrome, and I think actually a lot of the time we do have to kind of not fake it until you make it kind of, but just really, you've got to practice being confident, like showing confidence, even if you don't have it. How have you found it working in a male dominated sport as a non-male?
As a non-male. I don't know. Well, I'm very difficult to offend anyway. I'm quite a resilient, robust person. So I find it, I don't know. And I haven't had, honestly, like I said, people are usually really, really nice and really lovely, but I do work in a male dominated thing. I can remember one, a few incidents, but definitely one where the guy behind me, I won't say who it was, but a guy behind me was swearing a lot during the game. And it was during COVID, so there were no fans, and it was anyway, and apologized to me then for swearing. And I was like, why are you apologizing? I've generally got a mouth like a sailor, so I'm but then I think, there are people you could take that either way. So you're either the person that goes, how dare he apologize, because why, of course I'm a woman, I'm allowed to swear. And then, or there's me who thinks, oh, that was quite a nice thing to do, because I could have been offended, but I wasn't. But I could have. So that, I think sometimes, but and then there's only one other time when we were doing a taekwondo thing, but this is more cultural. So we were doing a taekwondo tournament, and a guy got concussion, and he was Muslim, and he wouldn't speak to me because I was a female medic, so I had to get the male medic to come and talk to him. But that I think that was more of a religious lean in rather than a male female one. I don't know. I'm not a girly girl, really, I suppose, because I've always, I suppose it's mad because nursing's a very female dominated profession. So, that's a lot of women in nursing. There obviously are men in nursing, but on the whole, it's more of a female thing. And then you move into sport where it's more of a male. But I think because I'm possibly a bit older, a bit more experienced, the things I've done, the things I've seen, the people I've met, the situations I've been in throughout my life, as I say, I tend not to get offended. But as I say, that everyone's really nice to me anyway.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You don't want to offend Ceri. Sounds like it's pretty hard to do. Yeah,
you'd have to go a really long way to offend me. Honestly, you would. But but I'm one of those, like, people generally are quite nice to me, and people always say to me, I can't remember who it was, but it was a manager at Cardiff. I can't remember which manager it was. And I just called him by his first name and said, oh, hiya, how are you doing? Whatever his name was. And they just spoke to me and they walked away. And then this person said to me, oh, do you know them? I was like, no, I've never met him before in my life. And they were like, but they spoke to you like they knew you. I was like, yeah, because I made him think that he knew me. So I think I've got that, like, hiya, how are you? And they're like, oh yeah, I must know her because she knows me.
Oh, Ceri, I'd have to agree. I think, like, when I first met you, you make yourself, like, you're such a welcoming person, like, definitely the kind of person, if I was injured, you just give off the impression that you're a safe pair of hands, you just like, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Yeah, I think everybody has different sort of experiences of workplaces. A lot of it's down to personality. I feel like over the years I've become a little less like things that may have bothered me when I was younger. It's either they've been muted or amplified. So I find myself getting kind of like drawn into other conversations as I've evolved as a person, I suppose. But yeah, it's really like down to the individual, isn't it? And where you are and who you're working with. Kat, how have you found, like, being a therapy practitioner as you've evolved as a therapist? Is there any advice that you could give from your perspective to a young up-and-coming therapist or medical practitioner?
I mean, just, I guess, to echo some of what Kayleigh said, really. But I think particularly when I was at Coventry United, where you're managing lots of things. So, like, for example, you're watching pitch and you then also have players doing rehab, and you might have students on placement, and when it's hot, maybe we've got to fill the water bottles up. So like, I think when there's lots of things going on, I think it's making sure and being clear on what your role is when you're there. So like my main role ultimately was to watch the pitch, right? To watch the pitch and make sure everyone was safe. But I guess my other role was also to make sure those that were doing rehab were doing that correctly. So I think if you have got extra staff or you do have students on placement, I guess it's making sure you can delegate certain tasks and deciding which ones need to be delegated. So it necessarily wouldn't be a student watching the pitch, for example. Like I would perhaps have I took that responsibility of seeing as that was my kind of main focus. But what I can do is delegate some exercise rehab to a student, because they all had plans, and so students knew what to do. But if there was anything they weren't sure of, they could come and ask me. So I guess it's delegating tasks if you're able to, depending on how many people are around. I think other things, again, like Kayleigh said, is making sure the defib's checked, your pitch side bag is checked. But also some things I've seen in the past where there's a pitch bag and there's a defib on pitch, but then it's nowhere near the person who would need to run on with them. Like, so is actually making sure that the defib and the pitch bag are near you on a, if you move to a different part of the pitch, because I don't know, maybe you're going to speak to somebody doing some rehab, take those things with you, so that if in the event that was needed, that stuff is already with you at that time, and you can run straight onto pitch with it, rather than having to run to go get them and then run onto pitch, for example. So I've seen that happen. Thankfully nothing as negative has come from that, but I have seen those items separated from the person who would need them. So I think there's that. I think as well, like this is probably a little bit of a personal thing from me, is that I've struggled with pitch side at times, and I've struggled with kind of worrying about it. And I'm going to say it just because I think I won't be the only one that's ever felt like that. And particularly as I lost my dad to a cardiac arrest. So just even that word is quite triggering for me. I wasn't there, but even just hearing that word and, obviously working in sport and knowing those things can happen, is that I'm probably quite heightened to that. And I think I've had to work really hard at being calm and kind of down regulating those feelings around that word and in the event of that. And I did have to get a defib out. Thankfully, it was more of a precautionary thing at one point, but that was a good experience for me, a difficult one, but one that I felt I managed really well after, once I'd kind of calmed down from that. But I think if you have had personal experiences from a medical side with somebody, is get support from someone, extra support, whether that's somebody more experienced, whether that's getting almost therapy or counselling, or support strategies like that, to kind of really help you manage those challenging situations. So yeah, a bit of an off-topic one, but just one I thought I might mention, just because it is personal to me, but I'm definitely won't be the only person that's experienced that. So I just wanted to share that, I guess, is if you are young and you've experienced something like that and you're going into this profession, do you need support? That may not be for everybody. They might be absolutely fine and manage those situations, but if you do have a sense and a kind of heightened sense into it, then maybe extra support might be something that you look to support you in your role, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's that classic scenario of looking after yourself before you look after others, like making sure you've got an oxygen mask for yourself before you look into the person next to you. Yeah. And I don't think you can really ever underestimate how powerful having a personal self-care routine and like discipline about prioritizing looking after yourself is. And I know Gary from the STA, some of our listeners might be members of the Sports Therapy Association. If you've got another membership, utilizing those resources and making sure that you're using the network of people around you to support you is really, really important. And I mean, I guess it's a slightly different career path working in the NHS. That sports therapists could go into the NHS, but there's different pressures there, and they're trying to build an MSK practitioner route through MSK reform. some people may know of that who are listening, I don't know, but how, Ceri, when you worked in the NHS, did you find, I know there are different experiences in different regions and different health boards and things, but were there any strategies adopted there when you were doing that kind of helped? Because it must have been quite a high pressure situation.
It was. First, sorry, Kat, for your situation. Sorry, and if
no, thank you.
Talked about, really sorry, and I hope you're all right and you've got help, and that's really important. Because one of the most traumatic things you'll do. So my time in the NHS obviously was a long time ago, and interestingly, I used to work in A&E, and I left obviously 7 years ago, but colleagues of mine were still there, and I was having a conversation with one, and he said, we've started, the NHS is much better than it was, so they've definitely got wellbeing services, they've got this and that. And he said that a junior nurse had come to him and said, oh, so-and-so's locked herself in the toilet again, crying because of whatever's happened in, recess or in trolley bay or whatever. And she's locked herself in the toilet crying. So he went and he dealt with the situation. And then I think it may have been a doctor or somebody else said to him, oh, that's awful that, they were locking themselves in the toilet and crying. And he looked at this, whoever, this doctor, and he said, we've been doing that for 22 years. I've been crying in a room for 22 years. And it was that realization that he said, we've done that for, and that's what we would do. So you would deal with something in recess or deal with something on critical care, but then you'd have to go straight back out, and you've got a 12-hour shift. So if you have an incident at the beginning of your shift, you then have to go back out and work the next 10 and a half hours in that department on that shift. You don't really get the opportunity, or I didn't at the time, to talk about it. They're much better now in the NHS. I wouldn't say they're perfect, but they are better in offering wellbeing services for their staff. But I think in a hospital environment, you tend to kind of group chat about it. So if something horrific happens on a shift or whatever, the people who are involved in that do tend to get together and talk about it and, go through it with each other. And that was awful, and what could we have done? And this is, dreadful. And I don't know whether many, healthcare professionals, but we are quite, we are resilient, and we do have kind of a dark sense of humor to help you get through things. Because if I consider everything that I've seen and everything that I've done, and, it would be possible, but we do, I think, as healthcare professionals working it, you do build up barriers, but they are better. I would say they are better than they were back in the 90s. But so 20 odd years, of everything that I've done, everything that I've seen. But I resuscitated a 15-year-old boy who drowned, and I happened to be walking home one day from Pilates, and he was drowned, and I resuscitated him. So, and I'll never forget that. And I don't want any of you to ever think that nurses, doctors, paramedics don't feel it when these awful things happen, because we do. And if you think of the numbers of people who leave in those professions in droves, it's not generally about the money, it's not generally about the things, it's generally about the working conditions that we're in, and the things we have to deal with. I mean, that's not fact, that's just what I would say, that a lot of it, I don't ever want you to think that we just go, oh yeah, it's another one, and do it, because we don't. We feel, we obviously feel. So they are better, but there's obviously still a lot to be done, because it's a traumatic place to work.
Yeah, no system is perfect, but I mean, I think that, anybody that's working in a kind of care related role, whether that's a therapy practitioner, medical practitioner, any level of responsibility for other people, that's going to have to involve a certain level of resilience and ability to be objective in under pressure. So it is like a really admirable thing to be able to help people as part of your work. But if you're self-employed in particular and doing pitchside work too, I'm guessing you've really got to look after your own interests and advocate for yourselves. Okay, have I asked everybody that question? I feel like I have. So my last little kind of pondering question for you is, if you guys, because we're, I suppose, coming up to the end of this podcast recording now, if you have any projects kind of on the go, or any plans for the future, maybe you can tell us what they are. And I'll start with Kat, I think.
I guess for me, it's just to continue to work in sport. I do enjoy working in women's sport and supporting, particularly like football, but I've worked in other sports as well, and supporting students on placement and developing their skills so that they can have as much kind of practical experience as possible before they graduate. I'm really kind of, like I said, I'm really kind of interested in women's sport, but so I'd really like to do a PhD kind of around the menstrual cycle and kind of physical performance. So I guess that's kind of will be in the pipeline at some point. It's nothing kind of final fixed right now, but that is something that I would like to do in the future. And at the moment, I'm actually in the process of just trying to kind of get a bit of a work-life balance. I think in sport it can be very full on and you want to say yes to everything, and I think that's quite normal when you're younger, and I think I'm just at a point now where it's about, okay, well, how can I still do what I enjoy, still help people in sport, but then also kind of get that kind of personal life balance at the same time. So for me, it's just kind of working through that at the moment, and trying to get that balance as well. So that's kind of my personal project, I guess, that links to my career. But then, yeah, the long term would be to do a PhD. So
that's so cool. I think like they all interlink really, you know, your professional and personal stuff. Kind of, you have to look after yourself, like we were talking about earlier, and making sure you get all the meals that you need and the sleep that you need is just as important as hitting those kind of like qualifications. Yeah, really cool. And the subject area sounds amazing. I think, you know, we need more research in that area, so best
absolutely.
of luck with it. You know, maybe if I can set you up with any connections, let me know.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Kayleigh, how about you?
Yes, so I would like to complete my master's. So I just finished my first year, so another 2 years on that. It's going to get a bit more researchy now, so going to hopefully start some research projects, one with Fiona, which I'm quite excited about in terms of kind of women's proprioception, which we've talked about, and I would definitely go forward with that. But also writing a case study on the patella sleeves that we saw. So in terms of kind of a long case study, how we rehab them, working with the paediatric physios and the hospital quite closely, and kind of building this nice case study on how we manage that in terms of rehab. So hopefully that will help other football settings where this has happened in their academy, because twice two came in on the same day, so you know it's something that is happening. So yeah, to publish that would be really cool, my first publication, so that would be nice. And continue working with pediatrics, continue traveling with work, doing what I'm doing, and second, what Kat said, finding that work-life balance, which I think in sport is just something that we all struggle with, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely. Oh wow, so many things in the pipeline. Really got to make sure
too many
that
things.
Pace yourself. Yeah, like it's always a matter of like picking one thing. And I talked to my partner who works in sport as well, and he's juggling, you know, lists of things, and a manager too of an organization, and just trying to like, you know, sift through it. I don't even need to listen to what he's actually listing. I'm just like, what's the most important one thing? Because that always really cuts to, you know, the most important thing is like really what's going to get you going into the next thing. And it's easy to get overwhelmed, isn't it? But
oh yeah.
Yes, we're busy people. Good. Okay, thanks, Kayleigh. Ceri, how about you?
Finish the decorating. That's definitely what needs to happen. Yeah, because so finish the decorating, then so at the moment obviously stay with what I'm doing, but we're trying at the moment to develop like a regional trainer plan, so we can have more of us training more of you in sport specifically, and more grassroots level, so not our higher level course, but sort of phase one, so that, you know, first aid for sport, try and get that out into more grassroots clubs across the country, just to give everyone confidence, you know, that you can do something if something happens. And yeah, that's hopefully what's coming in the future. Obviously stay at Cardiff, we will stay up this season, that'll obviously be fine.
That's so cool, because like I mean, just that point you made about trying to get grassroots, you know, address that issue. You know, we've talked about how hierarchically it doesn't make any sense how you have so little provision at that level, and it sounds like you guys are just going to target exactly where you need to address that. If people want to get into working, you know, are you going to be recruiting into those roles, or are they roles that are already filled? Because
yeah, so if anyone's ever been on one of our courses, you probably would have been invited to Medics for Sport on Facebook, on our Lubas Facebook page. So we did put a call out on there a little while ago. So we have got a course running in March where we're hopefully going to train 6 people to be regional trainers. So we'll see how that goes and how the rollout goes.
Wow.
For that. And then, yeah, we'll hopefully start, you know, recruit more, see what we can do. But,
amazing. Well, maybe some of our listeners will be heading over to that Facebook page. I'll get that link from you, and we'll put that on the show notes so that people can find it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, super. Okay. Well, I think that we've discussed all that we needed to, and I've run out of questions from my list. So but just the last thing really is if there's any other ways to get in contact with you, how can our listeners find you? What's the best way to reach you? If I could just ask Ceri, and then Kat, and then Kayleigh.
So I was going to say Lubas Medical on our website. I'm trying to think, is our email on there, but I don't know if it's, but I'm Ceri, Ceri, at lubasmedical.com. So that would be my email address. I am on Twitter, but I think I'm not Ceri on Twitter. You see, I'm like at Hasmum, because I think again, showing my age, I created that on the first day that Twitter went live.
Oh, wow.
And I thought you weren't like in the beginning, and it was like, don't use your real name. It's like, you know, so I think I went with Hasmum because that's Harry and Ava Smale's mum, who's my 2 children. So that's who I am on Twitter. Yeah, you can get in touch with me there. But yeah, my email is probably the best, Ceri at lubasmedical.com.
Fantastic.
So my age now, you know how old I am now.
Oh, thanks, Ceri. Kat.
So you're testing me now on the handles, if I can remember them the same. I think my Twitter one is cat_Whelan. So if you just type in my name on Twitter, I think it should just come up. The other one I've got is an Instagram page, which is Cat Whelan Weightlifting, I think it is, with some underscores in there. So just because I've got a background in weightlifting, so that's not just random. So yeah, so those probably are the 2 you can message on there, and I'd be happy to respond. So
lovely, thanks. And Kayleigh?
LinkedIn's probably the best for me. So just if you type my name, Kayleigh Jones, I've got lots of colourful people on my cover, if you want to spot me. And then Twitter is Kayleigh J383. Don't ask me why. There we go.
Super. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, guys. It's been amazing to get your experiences and kind of share them with our audience. And I'm hoping that this has addressed a lot of kind of questions and that everybody's got something from this. So I'll let you guys head off into the rest of your weekends and enjoy the rest of your Saturdays. And I'll catch you in some other kind of real world scenario, I'm sure, soon. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Lovely.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
guys.
Fiona. Bye.
So that's it for today's episode. But if you want more new and previous WIST podcast episodes, they're available across all your favourite podcasting platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe and be notified of new episodes when they're released, so check out our other episodes using the links in the show notes below. The STA website also provides links to all episodes and more information about the amazing support provided to those with a Sports Therapy Association membership. So you can head over to thesta.co.uk to find out more. And if you'd like to get in contact with me, you can drop me an email at wist@thesta.co.uk. That's all from me for now. I'll catch you in the next episode.